in New Orleans, and I've actually been there, and I loved it there so much. So I think that's part of the reason why I was so drawn to it. And I actually went to a location that is involved in this case, which I didn't know was involved in this case when I was visiting, but I later found out, which was very creepy. First off, I just want to say that I mean no disrespect to anybody in any way, shape, or form by covering this case in a ASMR fashion, and I don't want to upset anyone. If you're offended or you don't like true crime content, then please just skip this video. And if you are interested in true crime and you like ASMR videos, then if you would like to subscribe to my channel, that would be awesome. I usually make ASMR true crime themed videos, but I have done other subject matter as well, and I usually cover unsolved cases, but this one is not unsolved. I just wanted to cover it because, like I said, I just find it to be very fascinating and obviously very tragic and horrible, but fascinating too. Hi, so I'm just coming in here real quick. I just filmed the rest of the video earlier, and I wanted to insert this before I get into the story because I just feel like I need to. So this is a huge trigger warning. If you are triggered at all by any kind of murder, death, the death of children, and gore, gruesome cases, this is a very gory and gruesome case, and there is the death of children mentioned in a couple different parts of this video, and I do include a couple trigger warnings before I talk about them, but each part that I just mentioned, but I just wanted to put this in the beginning just to cover my bases and just make sure that everyone is aware of what this case is going to kind of entail. And if you don't think that is something that you should watch, then please just exit the video now. Okay, goodbye. So I'm going to get into the video now. We're going to start off by just talking a little bit about Zack Bowen. He was born on May 15th, 1978 in Bakersville, California. He was loud, outgoing, and a class clown when he was growing up, and he got decent grades in school and was popular. He was also 6'10", so he was a very, very tall guy. He was very long and lanky, so he was a little bit insecure about that growing up, but he eventually kind of, embraced it. And his parents were divorced, and after they split up, he stayed with his mother and his brother Jed in California, but eventually he wanted to move to Seattle to live with his dad when he was 18. Before he moved there, he actually planned a road trip across the country, and New Orleans was going to be his final stop. He just kind of wanted to have like a fun road trip before settling down. He was 18. He just wanted to have like a fun trip. And he actually decided to stay there because he loved it so much. And he began college but dropped out because he just didn't like it, I guess. And he spent most of his days drinking around the city, even though he was not 21. He was only 18, but he looked much older, mainly due to the fact that he was so tall. And then he also started a job as a bartender, and like I said, he wasn't 21 yet, but he got this job at a bar. I apologize, you might be able to hear my computer fan going. It's so annoying, I don't even want to talk about it, but I'm sorry. Anyways, so when he was working at this bar, he met a woman named Lana Schupak, who was a 28-year-old from Dallas, Texas, who was just visiting New Orleans for a period of time, and she was an exotic dancer, and he was just instantly taken by her. He thought she was gorgeous, and he kind of started hanging out with her, I guess, like after his shift or something at the bar, and they hit it off and exchanged numbers. And while she was on this trip, she actually spent a majority of her time hanging out with Zack, but the people that she was there with, they understood. They were like, girl, it's okay, like, he's cute, and he was cute. Zack was cute. And I kind of, like, I don't know, maybe that's like gross to say, but he was an attractive guy. Anyways, she thought he was attractive, and they were hitting it off, and they figured out that they had a lot in common. They were both very free-spirited, and she eventually had to go back home to Dallas, and when she did, they stayed in contact, and he wanted her to come back to New Orleans so bad, and eventually she was like, okay, I'll come back, and she goes back, and then they just continue to hit it off even more, and then she decides that she is going to move in with Zack in New Orleans, and they live there for a little while, and she gets a job at a club, but then she finds out that Zack is only 18 years old and she's 28. And I guess she just assumed that he was over 21 at least, or 21 or over, because he was working at a bar. I guess she just didn't ask. I don't really know, but yeah. And this was just really weird for her, so she was like, okay, I need to go. Bye-bye. And she broke up with him, but then she found out that she was pregnant in late 1996, and she didn't end up telling him that she was pregnant until March of 1997. And they were broken up at this point, so I guess she just kind of didn't want to tell him. But then when she did, he was actually very excited about it, and she was kind of like, okay, you can either stay in the child's life, or you can just do your own thing, like, it's up to you. And he decided to stay in the child's life, like, he really wanted to be a father, and he was very excited. And he was still very much in love with Lana and wanted to get back together with her, but she kept her distance while she was pregnant because she was just weirded out by the fact that he was so young still. And then she eventually had their son, and named him Jackson. He was very involved in his son's life, and eventually Lana had softened to him, and she decided that she was going to let him back into her life, and they began dating again. And when they got back together, he picked up a second job working at another bar because he wanted to be able to support the family better. He spends most of his free time with Lana and their child, but he also is still going out with some of his friends, and he actually gets in trouble with the police because he gets pulled over, I guess, in a traffic stop, but the case is dismissed against him. I guess there was like an illicit substance in the car that actually wasn't his, but he was in the car, and this was kind of a wake-up call for him, and he decided that he wanted to get his shit together, and he proposed to Lana, and she was pregnant with their second child at this point. And she has her second child, which is a daughter named Lily, shortly after their wedding. And then he ends up calling his brother Jed and asks him about the army, because Jed was in the army and Zack was thinking about joining the military. And his brother was like, yeah, you should definitely do it. There's a lot of benefits to it. And so he gets his GED in late 1999. I guess he hadn't graduated from high school officially. And then he joins the military in May of 2000. He enlists in the army on an 8-year term, and Lana is very supportive of this, and she stops doing her dancing, her exotic dancing, because he's going to be supporting them. And she's excited about this, and he quickly adapts to military life, and he's popular among his fellow soldiers. Then he had a really, really horrible experience happen when he was deployed in Kosovo, Albania. He gave a little girl who was 8 years old a piece of candy, and then he later found out that she was killed because she was interacting join him, but she hadn't completed the paperwork to move on base with him, which the base, I guess, like the home base, was in Germany. And he felt really lonely, and he had also developed something called a hammer toe because his size 17 foot did not fit into the Army combat boots. So he got sent back to New Orleans to get surgery on his toe. And he was actually really excited about this because they would get to see his family. And then when he got back home, he realized that Lana didn't really want to finish the paperwork, and she didn't want to go live on base with him because she was embarrassed about her past as an exotic dancer, and she thought people would judge her, I guess, which I was kind of like, I guess that's a reason why, but it also was just kind of weird. But eventually she moves to Germany with the kids, and the soldiers got along with her fine, and they didn't judge her at all, but apparently their wives did, and it's like, these shady bitches, like, don't judge her. Come on now. What the fuck? But yeah, so they were judging and being little shitheads to Lana just because of her past. And after September 11th, which we all know what happened that day, Zack was deployed to Iraq, and he really did not want to be in the military anymore at this point. He had really soured to it, and his hammer toe is acting up again. And then he was informed that Lana was diagnosed with hepatitis C in Germany, and she was really not able to care for herself or her kids. So, like, she couldn't even care for herself, let alone her children. So they let Zack go help her out for only 2 weeks, and then they were like, okay, get your ass back here in Iraq. And he was like, okay, he didn't really have a choice. And Lana's doctors were like, she needs help, like, he needs to come back. And they were like, that's too bad. So at this point, he was really over it. He was over the military, and he did not want to be in the military anymore. And then things started to look up a little bit for him because he met an Iraqi boy named Rashid. This is when it gets, like, I can't even really talk about this without wanting to cry. It's so fucked up. So I guess I should probably say, like, a trigger warning, an extra trigger warning for children. And I should have said that before with the Albanian child. I'm sorry, but yeah. So he meets Rashid, who's this sweet little boy whose family owns a convenience store that's close to the base in Iraq. And he kind of befriends him, and the little boy starts bringing him Coke and snacks, and then Zack is teaching him English. And they kind of just form this bond, and he kind of feels like an older brother to him. And then word eventually spread in the area that Rashid was helping out by bringing him Coke and snacks, apparently helping out the Americans, the enemy. And they fucking blew up Rashid's family store, and everyone in the family was inside the store. So they all died. And Zack was clearly and obviously very devastated by this. It was like another situation that happened, and at this point he was completely and totally over the army, which I completely understand. It just really had fucked him up at this point. And unfortunately that happens far too often. So he then returned to Germany for a little bit to see Lana and the kids, but at this point Lana noticed that he was very different. He was reserved. He was shut out from the world, and she was worried. And he was also showing early signs of PTSD. He had like night sweats and headaches, and he was paranoid. And he decided that he was just going to basically start failing his PT tests, his physical tests and stuff, to get discharged on purpose. And he was eventually discharged because he kept failing his tests in fall of 2004. And one of his colleagues one of the higher ups had recommended that he got an honorable discharge because he was an amazing soldier and he was doing his job well. But despite this, he was given a general discharge, which apparently is basically just a dishonorable discharge because you lose all your benefits and it makes it really hard for you to get a job after you are discharged. And I guess he didn't really tell Lana about this right away, but he kind of just showed back up to Germany and was like, "Hi, I'm done being in the army, like, I'm done." And she apparently was very upset by this, like, she did not want him to stop being in the army, and so she was like, "Deuces," and she just leaves. She leaves him and the kids in Germany and goes back to New Orleans. She gets a new job, she gets a place to stay, and then she is like, when Zack and the children go back to New Orleans eventually, she's like, "Oh yeah, and I also have a new man, so I don't need you anymore." I'm like, girl, damn. Like, he has been through shit. Like, some real shit. And you are just like, goodbye. So she takes the children and they live with her, and then he eventually starts living in a hotel, like just renting a room basically, and he starts working the graveyard shift at a bar in the French Quarter, and he's kind of content with this because this is where he really thrives. Like, people just love him and gravitate towards him, and he loves the nightlife scene. So he's working in this bar, and eventually he meets a girl named Addie, and Addie is a petite 29-year-old bartender who worked at the same bar as Zack, and she was from Durham, North Carolina, and I could not find her actual birthday. I know it's out there somewhere, I just couldn't find it, but I know her birthday is in January, and I believe she's a Capricorn. I'm a Capricorn too. Zack is a Taurus. It doesn't really matter, but anyway. She's a Capricorn, I think. But anyway, so she had also dropped out of high school, and she was really big into traveling, so her and Zack kind of bonded over this, but originally she wasn't really interested in him, but he was like taken with her. He was like instantly drawn to her, and she had a very short temper. She was known for her short temper, and when she would drink, she would turn into a monster, but he didn't care. He was like, "I love her, I'm obsessed with her, I need her." And eventually she kind of started to like Zack more, and they would hang out and talk. And also, apparently she had a little bit of a cocaine problem, and she would do some coke when she would drink, and when she was on that blow, girl, there was no telling what she was gonna do. She would just like freak out and fight with other bartenders and just go off. But he was just like, he really, really liked her a lot, and they were dating at this point. And like I said, she kind of had softened to him, and also it was noted that she had suffered some childhood abuse, and you know, it just all stems, and that's a really big theme with this case that just makes it all the more tragic. It's just like the amount of shit that both of them went through in their lives clearly is a huge part of this case, but we'll get into that more towards the end. But so yeah, she had some childhood trauma going on, and this, you know, was clearly kind of being thrown out for everyone to see when she would drink and when she was under the influence. And let's see, so after they began dating, this is when Hurricane Katrina started to come around, started to brew up, and the mayor was like, everyone needs to get out, basically, but it wasn't mandatory. And so Zack and Addie decided to stay, and they were actually really thriving in this kind of like survivalist world, and their area that they were living in the French Quarter actually wasn't that damaged by the hurricane. It was just kind of losing power, but they made friends with the other people that stayed in New Orleans during Katrina, and they would have like bonfires and stuff, and there were pictures taken of them because they stayed in New Orleans. And yeah, so they really actually thrived in this environment. some weird kind of way. And they kind of grew closer at some point too during all of that. And then life kind of, oh, also, when word got around about Hurricane Katrina's coming, Lana, she called Zack and said, we need to get the kids and get out of here. And he was like, no. And she knew about Addie at this point, and so she was like, if this is about Addie, just bring her to Dallas. She wanted to go back to Dallas. And he was like, no. So she takes the kids and goes to Dallas, but eventually she did return to New Orleans, and Zack and Addie started working their job again, and Lana kind of assumed that the worst had happened to Zack because she couldn't get a hold of him like the whole time that the hurricane was happening. But then she realized that he was still there, and she found out where he lived, and she showed up to their house with a bat, and she was like, motherfucker, you need to come see your children, basically. And he felt really guilty about it, and he wanted to see them, so they agreed that he would take the kids on the weekends. And he was really excited about this, and actually Addie was really excited as well, or at least she acted that way. And she bought the kids, his children, Jackson and Lily, toys and stuff. But then when the visitation, or when he would start getting the kids on the weekend, she would just leave. Like, she would leave the apartment and go drink. She didn't even want to be around the kids. And he was like, what the fuck? So she just was being really shitty to him about this, and she eventually told him that when the kids would come up for the weekend, that he needed to get a hotel room and be there with the kids instead of at their place. And he obviously did not like this. It's like, girl, jeez, who do you think you are? But the kids also were old enough to know what was going on, that Addie clearly didn't fuck with them. So they told their mom, Lana, about this, and this just made everything even more sour and toxic between them. And he also began using drugs and drinking more at this time, and Addie continued on with this as well. And eventually one night she really went off on him, I guess, and he broke up with her, and he left to go see his family on the West Coast, and basically said, I don't know when I'm gonna be back, but I'm done with you. And then a couple weeks later, when he was in Oregon, it said, with his family, which I thought they lived in Seattle, or his dad lived in Seattle and his mom lived in California, but I guess he was in Oregon with some members of his family. But he started to miss Addie and his children, and so he went back to New Orleans, and they rekindled their love and decided to make it work, and things seemed to be going good for a while. But then they got toxic again. The drinking and drugs started again. The fighting started again. At this point in time, Zack began frequenting a gay bar. And he did this because he kind of wanted to steer clear of anything related to Addie. I think he was very afraid of her almost at this point, and he just wanted to be somewhere where he wouldn't run into anyone that was related to her in some way, a friend, whatever. And he had always been someone who had attracted a lot of attention from both men and women in his life because, like I said, he was very tall and he was handsome, and people were just drawn to him. So he actually began to form a relationship with a man at this bar, and his friends later said that he was a little bisexual. I think that was the quote that they said. Basically, he wasn't really hiding it from anyone. He was kind of just out and about with this guy, but he obviously wasn't telling Addie. But then, obviously, eventually she found out that he was seeing a man, she goes to the landlord, and they hadn't officially drawn up the lease yet. Like, they hadn't signed their names. But Zack had paid the first month and last month rent. I forget what that's called. Security deposit, I guess. Something like deposit. He paid the deposit, but Addie said to the landlord that Zack was cheating on her and that she wanted her name on the lease. And the landlord was just kind of like, what is going on here? And so he just let her do it. But then Zack contacted the office to say he wanted his name on the lease, not knowing that she had done that. And the guy said to him that Addie had already put her name on, and Zack freaked out. And then the landlord was just in the middle of it all and said, you guys just need to work this out, like, get it worked out. And also Zack had his children, he was planning on having his children stay with him that weekend, and so he was extra pissed. Then on October 5th, he went into work and ran into a friend who noticed that he looked really rough, and this friend later said that Zack told him that Addie had taken his money and fled back to North Carolina, and the friend didn't really know if he was, like, telling the truth or not, but he kind of believed it because of Addie's past. Okay, this is another huge trigger warning for the part that I'm going to get into now. This is when things start to go really downhill. It is like really, really, really gory details here. So just beware for that, okay? So on Thursday, October 5th, 2006, Zack strangled his girlfriend Addie Hall to death in a drunken stupor. He fell asleep next to her corpse and he committed necrophilia. And then he got up for work the next day and went to work as if nothing had happened. And his coworkers remember him being out of sorts that day, and he was really quiet and wearing like sunglasses and a hat. And then over the next several days, you guys, this is really bad. Over the next several days, he cut up Addie's body in their bathtub with a hacksaw and knife and dispersed the pieces of her corpse into and on top of the stove for cooking, as well as in the refrigerator. He also placed her head inside a pot on the front of the stove, and her feet and hands in another pot on the back burner, her legs and arms in a roasting pan inside the oven, and finally her torso in a black plastic trash bag in the fridge. Apparently his intentions were to separate bone from flesh as a means to more easily handle the disposing of her body, and many at the time said his intentions were cannibalism, but the autopsy reports confirmed there were no signs of it. Clearly that's kind of where he was going, I think, but I don't know. So, Addie's friends and coworkers asked where she was, and they would call Zack and ask, like, where is she? And he told them that she had moved back to North Carolina, and they had no idea what had actually happened at this point. Then on Tuesday evening, October 17th, 2006, nearly 2 weeks after the murder of Addie Hall, Zack Bowen committed one more act of violence. He committed suicide by jumping to his own death from the 7th floor of the Omni Royal Orleans Hotel, and he left a handwritten note and his army dog tags inside a plastic bag in his back pocket, as well as the keys to their apartment. And he got really drunk at this hotel bar, and then he just jumped off. It's so like, this is what I'm like, this is insanity, is it not? I mean, it's so crazy and so awful. I can't even wrap my head around it. And the letter said police only, and this led to saying this is not accidental. I had to take my own life to pay for the one I took. If you send a patrol car to 826 North Rampart, you will find the dismembered corpse of my girlfriend Addie in the oven, stove, and in the fridge, as well as a full signed confession from myself, Zack Bowen. And it also went on to say, today is Monday, October 16th, 2 a.m. I killed her at 1 a.m. October 5th, Thursday. I very calmly strangled her. It was very quick. Halfway through the task, I stopped and thought about what I was doing, the decision to halt, and the first idea I moved to plan B. The crime scene you are now in came after a while. I scared myself not by the action of calmly strangling the woman I've loved for 1.5 years, and then desecrating her body, but by the lack of remorse. I've known for forever how horrible of a person I am. Ask anyone, and decided to quit my jobs and spend the $1,500 in cash I had being happy until I killed myself. So that's what I did. Good food, good drugs, good strippers, good friends, and any loose ends I may have had. I didn't contact any of my family, so that'll explain the shock, and had a fantastic time living out my days. It's just about time now. Oh, I can't. That really fucking freaks me out. Like, that letter, it's so, like, this is a really hard case too, because it's so gruesome, but he was clearly a very, very messed up individual who needed some very severe help and treatment in his PTSD, and it got to this boiling point where he just did the absolute extreme and worst thing he could have done. And so basically, after reading this note, the cops went to the home, like I said, and they noticed that he was telling the truth. They found all the remains of Addie, and they also noticed that the temperature was set to 60 degrees and on full blast, and it was freezing in the apartment, and there was a lack of a smell. There wasn't really a rotting flesh smell that you would expect. But they found the scene, and they found Addie's remains. So that there really wasn't like a ton of things to investigate at that point, because they had everything. They had the note and everything. So this is a little bit about the voodoo spiritual temple. Days before Zack murdered Addie Hall, they moved into this apartment above Priestess Miriam's voodoo spiritual temple, a well-respected and cultural establishment of New Orleans, and many would later claim that the dark voodoo history of the location had something to do with Zack's overwhelming mental illness and the violent outbursts of their relationship. So, I don't really know. I don't know. I believe in things like that to an extent, but I just think that they were two very disturbed individuals, and it was just a very explosive, toxic relationship that ended horribly. And what I was going to say about this voodoo spiritual temple is that they actually did tours. I think there was some kind of tour that you could do, not of the apartment above, but it was just in the temple. And when I got in there, I swear to you guys, I don't know if it was just because of the fact that it was a voodoo museum, but I wanted to do the tour originally, and like I said before, I didn't know about this case when I was there. And when I went in there, I just instantly wanted to leave. I did not want to be in there at all. I actually found a necklace. They had stuff like for sale, like cool crystals and stuff, and I was going to buy this necklace, and I don't even think I ended up buying it. I just really wanted to get out of there, and I was with my parents, and they knew that I wanted to do this, and I was like, I need to get out of here right now, and they were like, okay. They didn't really feel that like I did, but there was just something about it that I hated, and so we left, and I didn't go back in there. It was like really horrifying for some reason. I mean, it was a creepy place, so it makes sense, but anyway, that is the case of Zack Bowen and Addie Hall. I'm really sorry if this was like too gruesome. I know it's a very, very gruesome case, but to me it is so obviously tragic in so many different ways, and it just goes to show that there really needs to be more. I mean, this happened a while ago, and I think that we have come a long way as far as treating mental illness and PTSD, but these two clearly needed some help, and I think that their lives could have been saved if that would have happened. And it's so tragic that this was the outcome instead of them getting help, you know. It's just horrible. And then Lana and her children are without Zack. And, you know, the family members of Zack and Addie are without their loved ones, and their lives were just so tragically taken, especially Addie's family just having to deal with the detail. I mean, both of them having to hear the details. It's just absolutely awful. And like I said, it's something that, it's a case that has really stuck out to me for so long now, and so that's why I wanted to cover it. And I'm sorry if anyone was upset by the details. It's not my intention